Hi, everybody. My name is Tim Errickson. I am the artistic director of the Boomerang Theater Company, and I have the great pleasure today to speak with Randi Berry. Hello, hello.
Hello. How are you?
Randi Berry is the executive director of IndieSpace and the Indie Theater Fund. She has dedicated her life to serving under-resourced and underrepresented artists here in New York City. So there's a lot to talk about and a lot to unpack these days for undersourced and underserviced artists.
That's true.
How you doing? Let's start there. How's it going?
Today is a good day so far. Who knows what the rest of the day will hold, but
Sure.
but so far so good. And in general, I'm better than I was the last few months. I feel like this last month I've been able to take a deep breath, look at the world and what we're doing and how we're helping, how we could do better. And so there's been a little bit of a layer of calm the last couple of weeks, I would say.
Yeah. We are taping it today on Wednesday, August 19th. And so we've been at this process of quarantine and isolation and social distancing and a life without theater, quote unquote, for a while now. Yeah. And it seems to me sometimes that we're getting a little bit better at accomplishing things with these realities placed on us. How has quarantine been for you in terms of and isolation, in terms of all the different things that you do and are responsible for?
It's been a roller coaster, I would say. I'll start in that I am incredibly privileged that my work hasn't changed and my husband's work hasn't changed, and I have a partner who shares resources and responsibilities with me in my home. And I live in a multi-generational house, and my in-laws are healthy and they're helping me take care of my child. And so in that way, we've been good. We were sick at the beginning of this. I'm pretty sure I had the virus, but again, was relatively with mild results, thank goodness. And a really wild whirlwind of work at the beginning of this, because I'm so acutely aware of the concerns that artists are facing right now. I work with venues specifically who are closed and are unsure about when they're going to be allowed to legally reopen, whether they'll make it or not. And then small companies and individual artists who lost all of their work and income, So quarantine has been a wild thing for me because the first couple of months I was working 16, 17 hours a day. I wasn't sleeping right or eating right and just diving into work. I really have been saying, I feel like the first few months I was on another planet and I feel like I'm back on this planet. Right, exactly. Like, I don't know which was worse, but like, I don't feel like I was operating, we were all experiencing a trauma together, right? There was this collective trauma, and I don't think I was I was not even on this earth, so that's how quarantine is going, but we're safe, so.
Yeah. Having the virus, Sarah and I had it as well in March, and I had it worse than she did, and it was completely debilitating for 2.5 weeks of just doing nothing. And Sarah had it asymptomatically and had it for like one day for mild symptoms, and then she was perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's strange, and it was relatively mild. And I think I was going on a lot of adrenaline because I felt responsible for a tremendous number of artists that needed our support during that time. So I in some ways pushed through, probably not, it wasn't healthy for me to do that. But also at the same time, I had many dear friends that were sick. One that ended up in the hospital in the ICU for 11 days, whose symptoms presented themselves at the same time as mine did. We were likely together. Our children go to school together, and many of the parents at my child's school, I live in Queens, so I live just like half a mile from Elmhurst Hospital. We're right in the epicenter.
Yeah.
So, but I'm okay. You know, I was okay. I have friends that were dealing with symptoms for 90 days. So, so I feel really grateful.
It's been a wild ride health-wise, but
Yeah.
let's talk about good stuff. So,
okay, yes.
What can you tell me some of the things that the Indie Theater Fund is working on right now to help support artists through and companies through all of this craziness?
Sure. We, right when the theaters closed, we knew that we probably had 1 week to get resources into the hands to a lot of our artists that were going to need money for food and rent and medical bills. So we pivoted our emergency fund application process that we have every year, all year, to be more suited towards like a rapid relief response type application. Super, super simple application. No real proof of income necessary, you know, just trying not to create additional labor for our folks. And we were able to do that and get the application out and money into people's hands, I think like within 48 hours of the theaters closing. So I did that work with 2 members. My whole board participated, but 2 members of my board and I plugged, like really when at those applications. We ended up with hundreds and hundreds, nearly 1,000 applications. And we made a commitment to fund every eligible application and keep fundraising until we could fund every eligible applicant. So we did that. We closed those out. We were able to get to everybody by June. It took a while, but we did it. That's what we did with the fund. We also, one of our board members at the time created these community care sessions where artists could get together and talk about the collective trauma that we were experiencing, and tried to create a safe space for artists to come together and process, and perhaps create care pods or like pools of folks that could support us in a time of need. And then IndieSpace partnered with the Indie Theater Fund to then provide additional support to our venues who need more than a $500, I mean, our artists need more than a $500 grant too. That's all we could do at the time. And I do know that it was important at the time to get that money into people's hands quickly while everybody else got their act together to give, we hope, you know, more substantial support. But for IndieSpace, we also gave venue grants, much larger than $500. We gave venue grants to a handful of venues that we could to help them on their reopening, to pay back rent, to pay for adjustments to their HVAC system that they're going to need to make, or to invest in streaming equipment so that they could live within this hybrid kind of world that we're probably going to be living in for some time. And we also help them renegotiate with their landlords and give them advice on their leases and non-payment of rent and that type of thing. Classes on HVAC and panel with an architect for new seating configurations and things like that.
Yeah. So, things you never thought you'd have to be doing, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, not like this, right? Negotiating leases is part of our thing, helping artists understand the, you know, what leverage they have and what's negotiable is always part of what IndieSpace does, never under these circumstances. I mean, nobody's ever been under these circumstances, so.
Yeah, sure. So I have never asked you this question in the years that we've known each other. How did you transition into this life of crusading for the downtrodden, for lack of a better term? Like you come from being an artist and being, were you a performer?
I was, yeah, I am. I want to say I am.
Yes, absolutely.
But I just haven't been in a really long time. But yes, I have an indie theater company. And so I am acutely aware of the issues that indie theater artists face when they're trying to put their work together. I started a theater company with 4 women that I went to school with. We moved to New York together over 20 years ago, and we made theater. And we created our own, you know, work, our political and hysterical work. And we had a problem getting funding, and we had a problem finding space. And my day job happened to be in a commercial real estate firm. And so I started looking around and seeing all the empty spaces in the buildings that we were selling, and started asking if we could rehearse in them for my theater company. And we did. I mean, across the board, they said yes. And so I was rehearsing in any of the vacant spaces that we were selling, and writing shows in the conference room at my office, and offering free coffee and the soup that we had in the kitchen to all the artists in our theater company, and making it work. You know, I was able to get those same real estate folks that I started creating relationship with to donate space, but also to donate to my theater company. They financed my theater company. We started having benefits just so just so I could invite my real estate team and ask them to pay $250 a ticket. Nobody else, you know, could. You know, and I learned a lot. I became the director of operations for the investment properties group at CB Richard Ellis, which is a pretty, you know, is the #1 commercial real estate team in the world for a number of years. And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot about leases, and I learned a lot about tenant and landlord relationship, and kind of the way that the city moves and works. And because I was able to use that for my own creative work, I had my son 9 years ago, and I thought, well, I'm home with him. How could I hand this over to others that are producing right now? Because I wasn't producing at the time. So Indie Theater Fund and IndieSpace were born basically, you know, I mean, the Indie Theater Fund was an idea that happened at the League of Independent Theater. I'm on the board, the real estate chair there. And the Indie Theater Fund, which used to be the Lit Fund, was like an idea that came up through the League board, that we then, John Clancy and I, who's a co-founder of the Fringe Festival, we took the organization because the League is a 501c6 and endorses candidates. The fund is a 501c3, and we decided to separate it so that we could have autonomy and one wouldn't mess with the other, but just support each other. Yeah.
So as a creative person and as an administrator, how do you stay creative and sort of energized and sort of productive during all of this? I'm assuming that you are home for large stretches of time with your son and with your husband, and so when you get to working on IndieSpace stuff or the fun things, do you like to get a bunch of work done in the morning? Do you work late into the night? Do you glass of wine, cup of coffee? What's the Randi process like for getting stuff done?
You know, at the beginning of this, it was all day, all night kind of thing. But right now, I've tried to not make meetings before 10 in the morning. I'm actually very productive in the morning, more productive in the morning than I am at night, which changed for me as I've gotten older. But my son has been sleeping until like 11:30 or 12 o'clock, which is, it's just wild because he used to wake up at 6:30 in the morning, every morning, no matter what. And so I get a little bit of quiet time with my husband in the morning if I don't start until 10. And I have picked up again on a regular meditation practice. So I've been meditating, I have coffee in the morning and chill out so that I start calm. So I start the day calm instead of waking up and running right to my phone or my computer.
Yeah.
And I've been giving I have journal prompts so that I'm starting with writing and getting centered and doing, getting back to my meditation, which again, I was not on this planet. So I was not meditating. Of the time that I needed to meditate the most, I was
sure. Not. Yeah.
Right. There's like oh, how funny. You're back on Earth and you're also meditating. It happens to happen at the same time. It's like maybe there's like a connection there. So I meditate and then I try not to have a meeting before 10 a.m. and then I get started, and it depends on the day. Today, I've been in meetings since 10 a.m. back to back with like a bio break in between. I haven't sat down to eat a normal meal, but that's okay. It was all good and inspiring things today. I feel like I'm giving you like the longest answers
No,
for
this
the
is great.
short.
This is what people want to know. People want to know these things.
But wine is always good too. But after wine, I don't usually want to work, So yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So yeah, at the beginning of this, my husband, a lot of his work is with people on the West Coast. So we tried to switch while my son was in school. I would start work really early and we'd pretend that he was on West Coast time. So he wouldn't start, like I would try to get as much as I could done early in the morning through like 1 p.m.
Yeah.
And then we would tag team. And then I would take over, although he did everything at the beginning of this. I'm really grateful to him. He really, we tag teamed at 1 p.m. Yeah, right. That didn't happen.
It's amazing. It's always interesting to me how people, whether it be couples who live in the same space and who are either both in the arts or one in the arts and one doing something else, are relating to each other in a space in which they really probably can't leave very much, right? Like
Yeah.
you're in the four walls. And now if you are homeschooling or if you are feeding a child or like entertaining one for large stretches of time and you're trying to be productive and trying to keep your sanity, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, me too. It's fascinating to me too. The good news is, and it was tense at a lot of points at the beginning of this, mostly because I wasn't upholding my end of the bargain in any way I was laser focused on something, which, there's casualties to that, right? And there were I got a lot done with a lot of support and help, but I ignored a million other things that I needed to not ignore. But my husband and I, thank goodness, have like really tremendous communication, and we're a good team. We're really, really good team. And he took over everything. I mean, he did almost all of the homeschooling. By the time I actually emerged from this room after like totally glazed over, schoolwork was done, or I would like go downstairs and ask what hasn't happened, and they would be like, nothing, everything has already happened. You totally missed the day, like, and then he would come in and work, late. But since then, we've been trying. There's so many things that we've loved about this. I love working with him being home, I've always worked from home. That's not true. Since Indie Theater Fund and IndieSpace, I've worked from home. I'm in the theaters all the time and meeting people in the city all the time. But I've always been alone doing that while my son's at school and Sam is at work. And we've loved Sam being home too. We get to have a coffee break every once in a while. We have that time in the morning instead of like rushing out. So we've been trying to talk about, in all of this in this world, like what can we keep from this moment that's working for us? What can we try to maintain? And I don't know if him working from home every day will be one of those things, but I think, 3 to 4 days a week would be really tremendous. And then our son sees him more, right? Because he's here more and all of that. It's really good. It's good.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So when you are working on stuff, and if you get stuck with a problem or you hit a wall or there just aren't a lot of options in terms of trying to solve a problem, is there a piece of advice or something someone told you once that you sort of try to remember or fall back on to sort of get you to dig a little deeper, push a little harder, think outside the box, whatever it might be?
I'm trying to think if there's like a specific bit of advice I've been given, but I do know that when I get stuck, I usually end up talking to either my dear friends or my husband about it. Mm-hmm. And my husband constantly asks me like, can you control any of this? Like what is or what isn't what's in your control? Yeah. Like we can only do what's within our control in certain circumstances, and we have to like let it go otherwise, right? I'm not great at letting it go, so I let things go by, if you can't tell, I'm a talker. So I process, and once I've talked about something and I can often release it, to a certain extent, but trying to stay focused on what's within my control and what isn't is something I try to tap into when I don't know what else to do. So I guess good conversation and control.
That's awesome. I had a time management like instructor one time for some dumb day job that I had. We used to talk about this idea of two concentric circles, the one in the center being the sphere of things you can control, and the one outside of it being the sphere of things you can influence. And if it didn't fall in those two circles, you gotta accept it and move on. But there are things you can influence and steer, and things you can actually grab, and you gotta recognize which ones are which. And it's fascinating, thinking about how as artists, what you can control, what you can influence.
Right. And using your time and energy and resources productively, because if you can't influence it and you can't change it, we're too limited anyway. So why waste it? I remember my friend Deshell's dad would always say to her, nothing good ever happens at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can't change anything at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I was like, that's true. I should just go to sleep because nothing's going to change right this second at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's, yeah.
Was he trying to keep you from having that next drink or like going out?
No. Well, I guess that's when you say nothing good is going to happen. I mean, I think a lot of good things have happened. Yeah. I'm a theater person. Lots of good stuff has happened at 3. But when you're trying to solve a problem,
sure, yes, okay.
Most likely in either way, like you're not sleeping, right? Because you're just going over something in your head over and over again, what you did wrong, what you said wrong, what you could have done better, or this issue that feels impossible to solve, but you have this energy to solve it. You're not going to solve it at 3 o'clock in the morning. You can solve it at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. Or in my case lately, I'm trying to solve things at 10 a.m. or later,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great advice.
Yeah, it is.
So last question. Obviously, I would love to know what things people can do to help support IndieSpace and the Indie Theater Fund. One of the questions that this comes from is the idea of the nickel donation from every ticket sold. And so if there is a long stretch of time in which there are no tickets sold and there are no nickels, what are some things that companies or individuals can do to help drive dollars towards you, drive support towards you, and or even something else if it's not monetary help? What can we do?
Thanks for asking that question. I think there's a few things. Yeah, of course, nickels are important, but the whole point of both of our organizations is to serve our artists and not harm them in any way. So now is probably, unless everybody is doing extremely well, is not the time that they need to send their own nickels to the fund. But some artists have done shows and have suggested people donate directly to the fund. Right now, somebody's filming a show that was supposed to be at Edinburgh called Melissa Center is Marrying Jake Gyllenhaal. And they're donating all the profit that they make from the filming of that to the Indie Theater Fund. What we need more than anything, so I don't know, maybe this is breaking news for some people.
On the screen or something. It'd be great.
Yeah, but the Indie Theater Fund and IndieSpace are merging.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so we've been working on this and talking about it for almost a year now, and the pandemic was just an accelerant of that, really. We know that coalition building, collective action, resource sharing is the way forward. And both organizations share me as an executive director. Both organizations serve the indie theater community and have a focus on the smallest and most under-resourced organizations and artists. And we think we can create a community-run organization that serves artists from maybe their first show or two all the way through their potential to operate space or operating space. So what we need now is input on that. So I'm gonna, I haven't had time to put our flyer together yet, but on September 1st and September 30th, we're gonna hold community forums and ask folks to come and tell us what we're doing right, what we're missing the mark on, what we need to be doing more of, and try to encourage artists to become involved in the creation of the new organization, which will most likely, we don't know yet, but will most likely just fall under IndieSpace's name. Our intention is to continue all of our granting, but we hope, because as a combined organization, we might have more resources, that we can give more money more frequently. But you know, we want weigh-in, and we want to go even deeper on our radical transparency. Like, how can you all show up to board meetings and listen as a committee of artists from the community and influence the board to go in one direction or another? I do a survey at the end of every year for the Indie Theater Fund, and I respond individually to every single person who responds to the survey, and I answer their questions. I thank them for their feedback, or I respond to things like that, you know, their feedback. And so I'm considering these forums as like a live survey kind of, and a way for artists to create the service organization that they want and that they need, right? That they need. Because I'm an artist myself, I feel like I still have my finger on that to a certain extent, but we're only a small group of people trying to take the pulse of a large community, right? Yeah. So that's what they can do. They can show up to our community forums. We're doing one during the day during the week and one at night, so that people who have different day jobs can show up at different times, or family obligations or whatever. And they can give us their feedback. And that will be really helpful. And then the last thing people can do is, when we've supported you, you can tell everyone, because we try, like, IndieSpace doesn't charge for our resources, our services at all. But the only way we can continue to do that is if our organization gets support from donors and funders in order to continue to provide the services for free. It's important to me because these are very expensive services. Real estate related services are not cheap. And so I'd like to be free for an artist and expensive for a developer. That's the way that
That sounds like what everybody wants. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on and chatting. I'm going to, in the show notes here below our little video, people are going to be able to see the links to the IndieSpace and the fund, and a bunch of other things that you've talked about here, so that they'll be able to follow you. I assume that both organizations are on social medias if they wanted to follow them there, right?
Yeah, they are. And we're going to we were able to hire part-time, and right now it's temporary, but we're going to work on that, a new operations manager to work with us. Fingers crossed we can get funding for this to be a real position for a long term. But so hopefully our social media will be a little bit more active, because somebody else will be working with me side by side on a day-to-day
It's a beautiful thing when you get somebody else to do anything.
Yeah, and be a real partner to me as a counterpart, which is, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon. Hang in there, and we'll do all we can to support these two organizations. One organization.
The future one. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.